1. Last year I vacated a rental property in which I had resided for a few years. It was a pretty standard affair. Real estate agency, REA, was helpful. No real issues to report. They structured their business with a local office, which, as far as I know, simply handled the affairs of the tenants, with a home office located elsewhere, which handled the back end and finances. When I signed my lease, I nominated to pay by bank transfer, or electronic funds transfer. It's my preferred way since I dictate exactly when the payment is made and how much. I can also set it automatically so I never have to worry about it, keeps the stress away. At the time, it was also the REA's preferred payment method. Well, partway into my tenancy, I received a letter stating that my REA was changing banks, and that for the time being they were no longer able to accept EFT payments. They would have all tenants migrate to a third-party payment system. I was already unhappy with this decision, since I didn't want to involve a third party regarding my rental payments. It seemed so unnecessary. The kicker, which really pissed me off, was that this company charged a fee for making your rent payment. A little digging into the motivation behind this change was quite revealing. In my country, REAs must use a trust account, a bank profile, to handle money on behalf of other people, the owners renting out their property. Typically, these involve a decent fee structure and sometimes have a certain number of free transactions. Part of the REA's job is to reconcile these accounts to properly allocate money to the right portfolios. I did some research on this other third-party company to which I was supposed to make these rental payments. They handle rent payments and the bookkeeping on behalf of REAs. It seems they don't charge the REA for this service, instead making the tenants pay for it. They also charge different fees depending on your payment method, which they conveniently don't advertise on their website. You only find out when your REA sends you the sign-up form. In essence, my REA wanted to save some time and money by throwing me, and presumably the rest of their renting portfolio, under the bus and make me pay a fee to pay my rent to a dubious third-party company. I was livid. Thankfully, my state saw these shitheads coming. In rental tenancy law, they specifically state that an REA must provide at least one method of payment which does not incur a fee, beyond banking fees. My agency, of course, did this, but used the most obnoxious method possible: personal check. They knew people would be pressured to sign up for this system if their alternative was to write checks. But hey, they listed it as a valid form of payment, so... Just to be clear, in my country, it's very uncommon that someone would write a check to pay their rent with it. It may be more common in other countries, but not where I live. I called my bank and immediately ordered a checkbook, shortly followed by an email to REA stating I would be making my payments via check from now on. On my way home, I stopped by my post office and picked up some registered mail envelopes. Game on, fuckers. I was actually excited to do this, as I'd never written a check before. I had a spreadsheet made with all the information I could record: check number, mail date, delivery date, cashed date, tracking number, amount, you name it, I kept it. I also kindly notified REA that I had mailed the check and provided a tracking number so they could keep an eye on its delivery. Well. Several days after the first check arrived, REA's head office called me. They gave me a grand story about how this new system they've migrated to is so good and how safe it is, and how it's so convenient. I let her waffle on for a while, and simply tell her that I'm not comfortable letting a third party handle my rent payments. I then tell her I'll think about it and hung up. I had no intention of changing my mind. Next day I sent off another email stating I've considered it and I will remain paying by check. A few days before I mail my second check, yes, I'd only sent a single check at this point, I get another phone call. It's head office again. They're asking me to reconsider migrating. Out of the hundreds of properties in their portfolio, I was the only one paying by check. They also gave me some sob story about how they had issues with fraudulent transactions with EFT, which is a completely shit excuse. My first thought was that it's really unfortunate that all these other tenants now have to pay a fee to have the privilege of paying their rent. But the REA offered a compromise. They said they could set me up on a specific profile, which meant that the REA would pay the fee. but that I would be required to pay via direct debit. There's no way in hell I'm letting anyone have direct access to my money, least of all a real estate agent. Mind you, I've never raised the fee as my concern. Personal check fees and mailing by registered post was slightly more expensive than the fees they would be charging anyway. My issue was the lack of control and the fact that the REA was effectively lying to me as an excuse to save money. I politely declined their offer and mailed off the second check. Real estate agents buckled. They had no leg to stand on. They openly stated that check was an acceptable payment method, then got all shitty when their plan didn't work on me. For the effort they tried to save in reconciling my EFT payment, they had to keep doing it on top of accepting delivery of a check, cashing it, and waiting for it to clear. They emailed me after they received the second check. Mavery X, we request that you make your rent payments via bank transfer from now on. Remember the first email they sent me, that they were changing banks and couldn't accept EFT anymore? I wrote back. My pleasure. As you've changed financial institutions recently, can you please forward me the details of your new trust account? The response I got back was oh so satisfying. Please just use the original details you were provided and we will let you know if they change. Fucking busted. Fuck you, REA. I caught you in your fucking lie. I switched back to EFT as it was arguably more convenient for me, and despite my pettiness, I wanted to act in good faith. Though I was a little disappointed in getting prepared to mail checks and then abandon my routine. They never changed their banking information for the remainder of my tenancy, by the way. It was all a ruse. 2. As a general rule, contact and support employees can only tell you what they are allowed to tell you. But some will always try and stretch that in a way that helps you more than the company. When an employee tells you to consider the legal route, that may be because they know from experience that only the people who do that get what they want from this shitty company. Now about my malicious compliance story. I worked chat and email support for a company that handled certification for various technology, IT for various companies mostly, and language-related degrees. The companies that held the actual exams were supposed to send us the candidates' answer sheets, either by scanning or by mail. Some of them chose the mail option for some reason. There were multiple choice answer sheets, scanning would have worked fine, which meant results would be delayed for weeks until we received them. Also, unhelpfully, our company policy mentioned that results become available after 48 hours, failing to disclose that it meant 48 hours after we have received the answer sheets. This led to a big number of people coming to us and asking why their results were delayed. But icing on the cake, our company wouldn't let us say that the delay was due to the company that held the exams, sending them by mail. So what was supposed to happen is, customer asks, where are my results? It's been 48 hours. We say we will have them within 48 hours of receiving your answer sheets. They say, but it's been X number of days or weeks. Or I talk to the exam company, and they say they sent them and talked to you. And we keep repeating the same response like robots. So what I did was give them a simple piece of advice in addition to the usual message over chat. Since you're not getting a concrete response from either side, write one email, put both companies as receivers, and force them to give you a response while holding each other accountable at the same time. The result was pretty funny, honestly. Most people's response was, I think I'm going to do that actually, thanks. And shortly after that we would receive an email with the exam company CC'd, asking why their answer sheets weren't delivered and when their results would be ready. We obviously responded with, we have not received your answer sheets yet. We will have your results within 48 hours after we do, leaving the other side forced to answer why we haven't received them. As you can imagine, learning that the results were delayed because the actual sheets of paper were being sent from mostly India, UK, to Greece, that's where our headquarters were, made people very angry. And not only them, but also the companies that hired them, who were usually the ones sending their employees en masse to get certified on new IT-related standards, and had been led to believe that these delays were unavoidable. Sadly, I left the position before I could see the full-scale results of my actions, though my supervisors expressed their displeasure at my actions before I left. They couldn't exactly penalize me since I didn't break any rules, which felt pretty good. But I believe some of the companies, hiring a big chunk of the test takers in those countries, started sending them to a competing exam hosting company instead, which also used my company for certification, so my actions didn't harm my employers. Only the people who thought it was acceptable to mail easily scannable answer sheets in 2019. I can only hope that kept going after I left. On a brighter note, in the span of 1 month, I got a better paying job at an equally shitty company. Left that one exactly after my paid training ended, and moved to Norway to study at a university. Hopefully, I won't have to work support for shitty companies anymore. But others will, and maybe they don't like being dicks to people either. So keep that in mind when you contact them, and see if they're not trying to help you covertly. 3. I work at a translation office. Our job is basically to translate official documents, work certificates, academic degrees, medical papers, etc., to be used in other countries. The whole service is controlled and monitored by the judiciary, and we are basically under their direct supervision. My boss had to be directly certified by the court. Some countries also require our translation be double certified by the local court and/or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's pretty routine work most of the time, but since these are official documents, there are lots of rules we have to follow. Like what documents can be issued at official translation and how much we are allowed to charge, down to the smallest pennies. My boss is usually a super cool guy and does all he can to help people who come in, sometimes even refusing pay from people who can't afford it, even though he still has to pay the tax for the income, since it gets registered in the system. Now, this is actually something my boss did. I fully agreed with him, but it wasn't my call to make. Last week, some guy, let's call him Mr. X, comes in and brings us a bunch of documents to translate, including work certificates, his academic diploma, and transcript of his grades, and some other stuff. He brought them in 2 batches, so by the time we received the second set of documents, his first set was already translated and double certified by the court and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His grade transcripts were in the first batch, his diploma was in the second batch. At first, he refused to give us his diploma, saying that his mother had hidden the documents to prevent him from traveling abroad. Not the strangest thing we've heard, so whatever, but we kindly inform him that we are not allowed to issue translation of copies and have to see the original document. So does the court and the ministry. So he goes and gets it a couple of days later. Now, I was the one in charge of his translations, and the moment I picked up his diploma, something felt off. It was too heavy. I had to check several times to make sure it wasn't 2 or 3 documents stuck together. A closer examination showed that a post stamp attached to the back was not real, but instead a copy. Strange. I call my boss since I'm now sure this is a forgery. He comes, checks the document, but it's really strange. These documents have forgery prevention measures like holograms, UV light sensitive prints and seals, and most of them are in order except the stamp in the back, and the fact that the photocopy looks strange. At this point, I just suggested calling the cops and let them deal with it, but my boss, the good guy that he is, didn't want to get the guy in trouble and said he wasn't 100% sure, more like 90%, so he had someone bring it to the court to check but instructed the person to be discreet, get their opinion, and get out with the document, not leave it there as evidence. So they did just that. Within the hour, the document was back in our hands with a suggestion from a court official that we probably should treat it as a forgery. Hearing that, my boss decides to get the fake diploma to the guy and send him away. As long as he brings us the translation we issued for his grade transcripts, which was for the same course as the diploma, so was probably fake. He even offered to pay back the money he paid. Just get the translation to us, get your things, and go be a criminal somewhere else. Pretty lenient if you ask me, but it's his business, not mine. The next day, we get a call from the local court asking us why we are refusing to send the document belonging to Mr. X to the court to be certified. Turns out the guy had gone to the court and filed a complaint against us because we refused to do his work. So now my boss is pissed and does just as Mr. X wanted, sends the forged diploma to the court. They, of course, immediately can tell it's a forgery. They seized it, opened an investigation against Mr. X, and now he is on the hook for multiple crimes, some of them with serious jail time. The court also asked us to give them the serial number for all the documents ever translated under this guy's name. Everything including ID documents, work certificates, everything, so that they can contact all embassies and warn them about the possibility of forgery, which probably means the guy will be blacklisted in every country that matters. My boss made some excuse at first about not having all the serial numbers ready, but then Mr. X came in Monday with his father and issued some strange threats. So the next workday, all the serial numbers were at court. We also didn't have to pay his money back. And to think, had he just done as asked, he wouldn't be on the hook for so many crimes, and he would also receive a full refund. I would still call the police personally, but I have to admit, this was more entertaining. 4. So several years ago, I worked as an unarmed guard for a security company that was contracted to watch over a new construction site for a large wind farm. This area was hilly rural terrain with lots of wind, perfect for this kind of project, or so I was told by the many contractors on the project. It was also popular with hunters, both local and not, the possibility of bullet holes in equipment being the primary concern, followed by a long-distance theft. The property had an old dirt road running through it that had been previously open to anyone wanting to use it. This part becomes more important later. I had been working this site since they broke ground on construction and never had any issues, until a roll of copper wire was stolen. Our company had assumed that anyone trying to do anything on the site would use the heavily improved road through the site. They were proven wrong when that spill went out the back road. The only other access road that met up behind the property was nearly impassable for anything but four-wheel drive trucks, so it had been considered unimportant beforehand. Needless to say, we moved to 2 guards minimum overnight, one at the main entrance and one patrolling the site. The other change was that the company who owned the project decided to require every person entering the site to have a badge identifying them. Due to the popularity with hunters, it created some issues due to this road now being the smoothest and quickest way to the backside of the property. The hunters would come and go, but the people who owned cabins behind the property were more regularly seen throughout the year. It was one of these owners that became the biggest problem. He was proud to flaunt the office he had previously held and adamant that he had an easement to drive through this property to get to his. It may be different in other areas, but here an easement, ability to drive through someone else's property, is given if there's no alternative route available. With there being a road that led out to the public roads from the back of the property we were guarding, this wasn't the case here. The company we were contracted with was actually pretty reasonable with allowing access, no money involved, and just some personal information identification. For this particular individual, that wasn't good enough. He made a routine of speeding past the guards and refusing to stop, so a gate was installed and kept shut, short of the construction crews starting and ending shifts. One of the other guards let us know that he was trying to get a ticket or get arrested so he could take the owner to court. My luck would have it that he chose one of my shifts to try to run the gate. This shift being midday on a Sunday, with crew having come in for overtime to fix something in one of the nacelles. The large box behind the blades that had been flagged during testing and couldn't wait for repair. Honestly not sure what was going on with that end. With all that in mind, this gentleman drives up and starts yelling about accessing his property. We have his pictures, so I already knew who he was. I pretended to not hear him, clearly giving me enough time to start using the gate in front of him. This is not a fancy electric gate. It's a steel cattle gate that you have to walk open and closed. As I start shutting the gate, he starts driving forward, so I stop and stand in front of his truck and let the gate swing back open. He tells me to move out of his way, to which I responded that I know he won't risk running me over because he knows he would lose, and that he is trying to gain free, unrestricted access through the property to his. Seeing that I have the advantage, he decides to try a different approach. He made a comment along the lines of just blocking the road until I let him through or call the cops. I bluffed a little in telling him about the crew working on site, and said I wouldn't do anything about it since they were on overtime on weekend. I wouldn't stop them from doing whatever they needed to do to be able to go home, which led to him pushing to get the police involved. Now is where we start to get into the MC. I was given explicit instructions not to call the police on him, because all that was wanted was for him to come back during the week to get a pass, which I told him repeatedly to no avail. He decided to keep pushing the police getting called, which I kind of started to find funny the more he talked about it. He went from simply saying I should call them to more in-depth pushing. He asked if we had a phone in the guard shack, which we didn't, He asked if I had a cell phone, which I lied and said I didn't, which was more believable, considering they hadn't gotten very popular yet. He then said he did, but he didn't want to call 911 since it wasn't an emergency, and asked if we had a phone book. Still not sure why we had one, but it was there. He even tried to get me to call the sheriff on him from his own phone, which I again refused. Not ready to give up, he took it upon himself to call the sheriff's department on himself. Satisfied that the police were on their way, he moved his vehicle aside and allowed me to shut the gate. It was about 30 minutes before the first deputy arrived, since it was a weekend and a remote part of the country they served. Being the security gate, they approached me first. I told them what had happened, and that neither my company nor the property owner had an issue with him or what he was doing, as he was outside the gate and not blocking anything. The officer shook his head about the guy calling them on himself, and walked over to the ex-elected official. It's about this time that the crew that was working came down and asked what was going on, and had a quick laugh before heading back home or wherever they were staying. In all, about 5 officers responded to this call, and each one gets a laugh about getting a call like this one. It must have been a slow day for them to have so many show up for this joke call, and then take another half hour to 45 minutes deciding how to handle it. In the end, they gave him his ticket for falsely reporting a crime or something along those lines. To which I hear him yelling out his window as he drives off that he got his day in court. The officers who had yet to start leaving laughed and said, yeah, he will get his day in court, but it's not going to be the one he thinks he's getting. 5. This was a couple of years ago, so the conversation might not be exact, but I can remember exactly what happened. I worked in a popular fast food restaurant. I had worked in the food industry since I left school, so I was pretty good at my job. I always put a smile on my face and tried to make the customers as happy as I possibly could, even if I wasn't in the best mindset. Also, I should mention that the restaurant was literally opposite a football stadium, so I could get very busy during match days with the line going beyond the restaurant doors. We had a few regular customers who would usually order the same meal every time they came in. Majority of them were super polite, and we would have a casual chat while the food was being prepared. Apart from one particular customer. This particular customer always made a scene about how he was a taxi driver and didn't have time to wait in the line. He also wanted his food then and there. Overall, super rude and entitled. What made it worse was the managers always complied with his demands, letting him skip the line and making his order before he had even paid. This always irked me, but I could never say anything. Cut to the day in question, there was a huge match in the stadium with easily over 10,000 fans coming to watch. It was going to be busy. The managers had made sure we had extra hands in store to handle the incoming stampede of customers. So the match finishes, and just as expected, the line is long. I'm talking out the door and down the street. We handled the horde of hungry fans as quick as we could, with the customers waiting about 20 minutes for their orders. Not too bad. The extra sets of hands at this point have now gone home, and I'm serving the last few customers when I see the rude driver trying to push his way through the doors of customers leaving. That itself was quite funny to watch. He finally makes it through the doors and barges through the line to the front. I know what's coming, and so it begins. He starts complaining about how he had to wait over 30 minutes to just get into the store. How this is unacceptable for a regular customer, especially such a busy one as himself. I apologize to him for the wait, but explain that it's match day and there's not much I can do about the line. He then decides to go on about how slow I am and I can't do my job properly. At this point I was tired and just wanted to go home. Still, I put a smile on, and with my best customer service voice asked what he would like to order. This seemed to be the final straw for him, as he stated in a very loud voice that I should know his order by now, which was a set box consisting of 1 piece of chicken, rib, and extra large fries, and that I was just being petty. I thought to myself, I'll show you petty. I apologized and put his order through. He proceeds to throw the money at me and storm off to the collection area. No problem, I finish up his payment and go round the back to make his order. He always complains how there's never enough fries in his box, so I make sure to put extra in the box. Again, I just want to go home now. The quicker I serve him, the better. So I finish preparing his box and go to give him his order. He stands there holding a finger up at me, telling me to wait while he checks the food. What a surprise, he says he wants more fries whilst throwing a tantrum. I would expect from a 3-year-old. I explained to him that I had already put extra fries in the box, but no, he wanted more. I try to explain that with the set box you get one side of extra large fries, basically one large and one small combined. He then proceeds to say that there's no way those were extra large fries and demands a new fresh box and to speak to the manager. I'm done now. As previously mentioned, I had already had multiple encounters with this man. I was done with him and his rude ways. I apologize, go round the back and explain the situation to one of the really nice managers. The customer had previously been rude and racist towards the manager, so without a second breath, he said he would deal with it, but I had a plan. I asked him to just come up front and stand witness for me, in case anything would go wrong. Here comes my turn for the malicious compliance. I grab the piece of chicken, one large and one small bag of extra fries, walk around the front. My manager is looking at me like I'm going insane, but just lets me continue, purely for the interest in seeing what I was about to do. I ask my manager what an extra large fries consists of. One large and one small, he replies, brilliant, just as I had been saying all along. I then proceed to grab the box with his chicken and dump the correct amount of fries into the box, which was considerably smaller than the previous box. He looks at me dumbfounded and shouts in my face that I should listen to him and that the customer is always right. He makes a grab for the previous box I had made, but with a smile I say, yes, you are most certainly right. Here is your box of chicken with your extra large fries. Then proceeded to chuck his previous box straight into the bin. He was furious, claiming I was terrible at my job, along with a flurry of other insults that I should be fired, all while my manager was stood there trying to hold back his laughter. I simply said that I had given him exactly what he wanted, and I couldn't see the problem. Other customers who were waiting had seen the whole ordeal, and were now laughing at how pathetic he looked. Many told him to get lost and leave me alone. He now was looking like a fool in front of the whole store. Safe to say he took his box and left rather angry. I was told I could go home now, finally, and slept peacefully, knowing that I had finally stuck it to the rude taxi driver, even if it was really petty. Oh, also, he never came back to the restaurant again. Bonus. He got multiple calls to the taxi company complaining about how rude and disrespectful he was to others, and was promptly dismissed from the company. I'm guessing he had previous complaints about him, and they too were done with him. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 100. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like and subscribe, and comments are also very much appreciated. Right, no shoutouts today, I don't think. There are some coming up in the next few days, so we'll get to those when they arrive. What day is it today? Right, Saturday Revenge for a change. We will have... I don't want to jinx it. We should, hopefully, have spinning plates next week. It's just, sometimes they're a little thinner. I've got most of what I need. I'll have the other two hopefully by next week for next spinning plates. Let's see. I should do something to celebrate for episode 100. I'll have a sip of this drink. There we go. That's the episode appropriately celebrated, and we may now all continue with our regularly scheduled entertainment. Let's see, right, tonight I'm hoping to do the regular gaming stream, probably starting about the usual time. I'll go for a nap before it starts. I've been getting up a lot earlier than usual because, when I've got health issues, which I've had of late, my sleeping schedule gets messed up. So I'm trying to nudge it back to normal now. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.